such a medical test in my life. I swear blind there isn't a square centimetre of my hand, my body, that they hadn't pulled, pushed, and did whatever. Oh, we didn't go on. We went on and on and on and on. And eventually, he said, okay, fair enough. And then we started these tests. And they stayed lasted for 3 days. And they were so interesting, but you had no idea what they were getting at when they asked you questions. Some of them were mathematical, some of them were English, some of them were more academic, some of them were more practical, engineering types of things. Some of them were sort of stuff that you get when you try to apply for Mesa, sort of thing. Mrs. Roberts lives at number 6, number Jean is number 18, so on, so on, so on, so on. What colour's the front door? It's that type of stuff. Well, I was sure of her. So the next thing is early in August, I received a letter informing me that I had failed. But they would offer me a PACT course, PACT, Preliminary Aircrew Training course. It will be held at one of the polytechnics, Royal Polytechnics, and they chose Eden Park for me. And this was a bit of a mix-up. We were to attend here, Salford University as it is now, from the morning, all day. We had lunch at the university, but we started life at Eden Park, breakfast. We called the train into Manchester, marched to Salford, spent the day at Salford, marched back to Manchester, Manchester back to Eden Park in time for the first sitting of the early tea. But why did we sleep? I don't think they'd ever thought about that. We found ourselves all billeted round private houses, round the Eden Park entrance. And I got landed with a couple that they were absolutely magnificent. Two of us got landed there, and the other lad lived at Bolton. So every weekend he used to go home to Bolton. But of course I couldn't because I was in Nottinghamshire. And they looked after us like as though we were at their door, their son. Well, eventually, that came to an end. On 1st of January, I think it was, they said, this course is at Worsdell, and it would be an academic course. And what we're trying to do is, they didn't say it, but that we knew it. The university were up here with their education. We were down there. And the RAF have no knowledge about this. It wasn't a case of that coming down here to this. It was a case of this was going to come up here. And that's the best thing that's ever happened to me in my whole life. I say to this day, if I hadn't done that course, whatever life I've had would have been pitiful relative to what I have had as a result of learning that course at Salford University. It was wonderful.
Roy, can I just interrupt? I hate to interrupt you because you're in such full flow, and your memory for detail, I mean, I'm sure everybody in this room must realise that this man has a memory that is absolutely astonishing. Just put your finger on where you've got to, because we're coming back to you. But I just, while you've got as far as Eden Park, before we leave the country, I just wanted to bring in Len and Ted on the screen and just compare their experiences. Can I just ask you one question though, Roy? Were you in the ATC at all?
I'm sorry?
The air training cadets, did you draw them at all?
I was an ATC.
You were an ATC cadet, because you were as well, weren't you, Len?
Sorry?
You were in the ATC as well?
ATC, yeah.
And can you tell us how your story started? Because wasn't it something to do with seeing a Spitfire, a bit like we are today?
Well, my story was rather different to my colleague. In 1943, I worked in the precinct at Salisbury Cathedral, and there I saw a Spitfire fly over, and I thought to myself, that's what I want to do, fly a Spitfire. So I joined the ATC, and became a sergeant. It didn't take very long. You had to pay a few exams. And in November 93, I was called up to join the RAF. Well, I joined the RAF as a cadet, and we went up to London, and because my education was secondary modern, I went on a course for 6 months at Ealing Technical College, run by the RAF, and I spent that. And then I think it was in about May 1944, I went up to London again, up to Regent's Park, and I was sent on to fly to see whether or not I was able to fly. And to do that, I had to fly Tiger Moths at the polo ground at Windsor. And where they now play polo. All I can remember about that is that there was some royalty over from the Netherlands who came over to escape the Nazis. So I soloed my pilot, my Tiger Moth in front of royalty. There can't be many people who've done that. I finished that, I passed, I got the original one here, and I soloed. That's the original one.
Pilots flying log. So that's for your, that's for the Tiger Moth.
You would test whether or not, before they started, whether or not you were able to fly. Well, that did prove that I had some idea, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I did what I was told. And I passed this. They sent me up to London, up to Regent's Park, and there I did some little bit of training, and then we were sent to somewhere in the south coast.
Stormy Down?
Stormy Island.
No, not Stormy Down. I ended at Stormy Down.
Torquay?
Torquay area.
Abercourt?
And there I did 2 days of tests, as my friend here did. So there was colour tests, educational tests, testing photographs and maps, and you had to identify which part of the map your photograph took, etc., etc. Eventually, after I came out as a trainee pilot come bombing. From there, I joined, I went to Stormy Down to an EFTS. From there, I somewhere else, and eventually ended up in Bridgenorth and did my flying training in number 5 EFTS at Bridgenorth. And then from there, we went to Heaton Park, and it was Heaton Park. We met lots and lots of people. We went to various aerodromes doing various things. One of which I probably told you, they put me in charge of some Italian prisoners of war and gave me a gun and no bullets. We did that sort of thing. I also did bombed up aircraft for the RAF. And I remember that at that time it was so cold, they used to have a toss of rum. Well, first of all, I said, no, I don't drink. But the second time, I must admit, I did drink. It's very, very cold. And I can't remember what they must have done, daylight bombing. And this was in the middle of the night. Anyway, I went to Stormy Down, and a group of us went up to Scotland, and eventually an Aquitania, who went with a shipload of injured Americans with us, and we went to America, and from America to New York, up to Canada, and then down to Mesa. So
Okay.
that was my my introduction, at no time did I do any tests other than the educational course for 6 months. I did the flying training course in my Tiger Moss, and then went to the assessment I had at Torquay. In no time did I do any interviewing. I was just the lot I can remember. That's my story.
Thank you.
There's one very interesting fact here. You've heard Len's story about how he went in. You've heard my story. We were totally different in our approach and everything, yet we were all training to be pilots. The RAF treated us totally different. Len went to one school to do his flying grading. I went to one about 5 miles away at Wingfield, which was just close to Windsor, Broadley, who were stationed in the border. And I had a pilot who was on, he did a tour of duty, and he was on recreation, I suppose, and he was my instructor in the Tiger Moth. Now, Len and I then, our pilots went all over the place, and yet we were both all training for the same thing, and it was all almost incredible, because it didn't seem as though we were dealing with the same people, but we were.
It's fascinating, that, isn't it? That's why it's so useful to hear you both telling your stories.
Yes.
I'm just going to try and bring Ted in now. I don't know if Ted's waiting very patiently. He's been on Zoom since 10 o'clock this morning with June, and they've been watching us from a distance from home. Can you hear us, Ted?
I can, with my hearing, not really.
No, not you. It's Ted I'm after. Ted, can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello, Ted. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Are you able to hear what's being said by Roy?
Yes, my experience is different.
Okay, you tell us yours.
Carry on.
Carry on, Ted. Do you want to tell us yours? How did you join the Air Force, and what sort of training did you have?
Do you want to hear my experience?
Yes,
Right, well, my experience is quite different to these two gentlemen, because I was a grammar school boy, and I matriculated, and I too volunteered for the RAF when I was 17 and 8 months, and so I had my, the main thing I had was the medical test, which was, I was only 17, nearly 18, and they got 40 of us, all the volunteers, they were doing the medical test at the same time, and they stripped us all off, and we were there for hours, completely stripped off, walking about, and it was a real culture shock. Most of us had never been naked in front of other people before. And there were lady doctors as well as men doctors, and it was a real culture shock. Anyway, passed the medical all right. And I was a member of the ATC, and in the ATC they had examinations of proficiency part 1 and of proficiency part 2. And I sailed through the proficiency part 1 with no problems, and I studied for the proficiency part 2, which took me certainly well over a year, and I sat the proficiency exam, and I passed it. I was in London at the time, and I was one of a very few who passed this proficiency part 2 examination. And the proficiency part 2 was all the subjects that you study at ITW. And having passed it, I was put together with all the university graduates to carry on. And when I was called up into the Air Force, and I went on to ITW, I only did 4 weeks at ITW instead of 13 weeks, and then carried on waiting for to go to America for my flying training. And if I hadn't passed that proficiency part 2 examination, I would have been probably on the same course that these two were. As it was, I was on course 25, and so got a real head start. And I graduated. I was one of the last I was on the last course to graduate at Falcon Field, which was just after the war started. I think it was August 1945. And Jude Stringer here, she subsequently married Derek Stringer, who graduated at the same time as I did at Falcon Field. And I never saw him again after we graduated because we went our different ways. And I didn't see him again until we started attending the Falcon Field reunions. And that's when I first met Jude. And Jude is now, she's been my companion for 7 years, and she is really everything that a wife should be. It's just that we can't be bothered to get married. We are tremendously close and happier together we've ever been in our lives. So we are two very fortunate people, and love each other very much. And as I had the same experiences at Falcon Field as anybody else who did the course, except that I was there for the full course, and I had to leave in between times. One when I went around all the sites in Arizona, like the Grand Canyon and the Petrified Forest, and various cowboy towns. The other lead that I had, we went to Los Angeles, to Hollywood, and met all the gold stars there, and we were looked after very, very well. And the people of Arizona looked after us wonderfully, and lent us their daughters to take out on the hayride. It was a wonderful, wonderful time in my life, as I'm sure it was for everybody else who went.
It's extraordinary, Ted, that all of you veteran pilots say it was the time of your lives. Are you coming back to join us after lunch, or?
Yes, I can do.
And you could.
Can do.
We'd like you to.
Yes.
We'd like you to.
Send them a new link.
Yes, I can do. You will have carers in.
What time do they come, Ted?
Well, the carers normally come about they're supposed to come through 12 and a half past, but sometimes it's 1 o'clock before they come.
Okay, well I'm just going to ask Roy and Len just to tell us a bit about the trip across in the Aquitania. Did you go on the Aquitania?
No, I
You're
went
a different
to
one.
Mauritania.
Oh, Mauritania, okay.
Because I was a year before that, you
Yes,
see.
yes. So I'm going to ask them to say a little bit about that, and then we're going to move on to the next bit. So if you need to go to deal with your carers and have some lunch, feel free to do that, and then we'll come back to you later on. If that's okay. Lovely. So we'll say bye for now.
Right, okay,
Let's
then.
talk to you a bit later.
Bye then.
So we'll come back to you, gentlemen, now. Who's going to go next? We're going to talk about the trip across on the Aquitania from, it was Europe, wasn't it? You went from to New York?
Yeah, to New York, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to start? Can you remember much about that, Len, or do you want Roy to start?
We were, all I remember, it was an American, it was run by an American, they were
I'm going to
injured,
send you a
and
new
they
link
paid very
this
well.
afternoon
And
because
we've
I
had
need to
with
do
them.
something in between times.
Right, that'll be okay.
I'll send you another link in a minute.
Right, thank you. I'll go now.
Go and enjoy your lunch.
Sort out the place.
So we had food. I've never had food like it. I mean, we had some really good food. The only thing about it, we were down in the bottom of the boat, and we used to go up periodically. They were allowed to walk on to the ship and to get fresh air. And it was really lovely to experience the fresh air. Then we were sent back again underneath. But the prime purpose was to help these injured Americans, and we were there really as secondary people. You know, there was room for us when we entered there, but we had things like eggs. But I've never had any egg for years. I never heard of eggs. And so it really was, it was very interesting. And the reception we had in America was really brilliant. And we were taken by, I believe it was train up to Canada, just inside Canada. And then we were on this train going all the way through America down to Arizona. And that was when we lost a wheel in the plane. And all I can remember of there is that I was told not to leave the train because we were travelling through an area which was German occupied. From people coming over from Germany, they occupied that part of America, and we were told not to leave it. To stay by the aircraft, by the train, because if we went too far, it would be our own fault. We got into trouble. Because although we were in America, parts of America, they were anti-British, and parts of America, obviously, they were pro-British. And that particular part was anti-British. I don't know, Roy can remember that, but...
If you contrast, this is interesting how we varied. Len was on the Aquitania, I was. We were the last people on the Aquitania. We were not pushed down to the bottom of the boat. We never went indoors. We slept under anything that was covered on the Aquitania all the way to America. Now look at the two differences. Len was early on and was pushed down there. We were upstairs. But our sole duty really, apart from being a passenger, we had to carry the American wounded people that were on the quay side of Europe back onto the Aquitania. And as soon as we got them onto the Aquitania, they took us up, the two GIs would take the stretcher from us, and they took them into what were the wards. Well, we were never allowed anywhere near to go in to see those American troops. And they were all very, very wounded men indeed. And now look at the difference between the two on the same journey. what Len didn't talk about, more than likely, I bet you can remember, we would approach America and we were doing about 4 or 5 knots, and everybody was out, and it was that famous skyline that you see nowadays, Statue of Liberty, tall skyscrapers, all the rest of it, and a whole harbour of little boats coming out to greet the American wounded, not us, the American wounded. But they wouldn't have heard a word of it, any bit at all, because they were down, they were in the wards, and we never saw any of them. But that was another sight, I could never forget them. It was absolutely marvellous. But look how different it was. I would sum it up like this. If you watch a darts match on the television, lad on number 1 comes up, picks up his 3 arrows, boom, boom, boom. 190! Carry on. And then the next man would come up, he'd pick up his darts. 60. 140. 180! Now, both those men have got the same target to get 180. Yet just think how different their flights were. And how that was with us. Some did it one way, some did it another way, and yet the target was the same every time going. And it was amazing, particularly with the tests. I remember having a long talk with one of our colleagues, Bill Haylock. Bill followed me one pattern down from the EFTS, the Elementary Flying Training School. Bill didn't do those tests. Now why we had them, I don't know. Because they were part of a standard test that they used to give their RAF potential officers at Cranwell, which was their staff college. But very few of the people did them. So why did we get picked out? It was just random that we got landed to do it. So right throughout, all our courses were different. And yet, as I say, I've got my record here of where we went from travelling to volunteer all the way through until I was lucky. I got offered day release at the end of the war. When the war finished, we were in Arizona, of course, when they dropped the 2 bombs on Japan. So that put paid to the war, and our training was done under lease lends. The American government would lend the British government as much money as they wanted to be repaid starting from the finish of the war. So of course that was that, they were the end of that. But the thousands of men had been conscripted for the forces. Now they couldn't let them all go back into City Street all at once, it couldn't be done. So they took the policy, first in, first out. In other words, the people who were first recorded for conscription were the first to be released. Now that started in 1960, 46, 61. They're about, well, look down there, 46. That started in January 46. Now, it crossed somebody's mind that there was millions of people, these men, all kicking their heels in the Army, the Navy and the Air Force, who were skilled bricklayers, lower joiners, plumbers, what have you, who were just kicking their heels waiting to get out. Jerry had been knocking us about a bit, and we want some rebuilding doing. So why not let them come out early? They called it Class B release. And if you was down in their records as being a joiner, a bricklayer, whatever you, they offered you early release, provided you came back into City Street and stayed at bricklaying or whatever it was until your normal time of duty came out. Now I was down as an engineering structural draftsman, so they wanted some power station building, and I got out on road release. And they gave me 4 hours to make my mind up. 4 hours to make my mind up. It was useless. Anyway, the result was, I went back, and I thought, now then, there's all the RAF pilots who were no longer flying on operations, there was all these pilots who had done the pilot training and were waiting to get onto operations. There was us that were in the process of training. I thought the chances of us completing our training was negligible. So I said, yes, I'll do it. So I came out on the 1st of January, 46. And some of our colleagues, and Len was one of them, and I'm as envious as I can be. He's got this. Oh, you lucky devil. He done what we'd all been trying to do, get those wings on his shoulder. But I thought, no, there's no future in this, I'll get out. So I was the first of our group, 25 of us, and we've been together, almost totally together, right the way through, all this stuff.
All the way,
All the way through.
all the way through.
All the way through, right the way through. So it was a part of my life. Well, I've been so grateful that I did it, because as I said earlier on, it was as a result of that training that we did, and particularly to get to Eaton Park from when we volunteered. That was the hardest bit, because that was the sort of volunteer Eaton Park to America to Falcon Field, and then in Len's case onto the flying, to mine back to City Street. But that experience and the work that we did at Salford University when yours was at Ellington, yes, it put me up for life, it set me up for life, and I've lived a very, very miserable life if I'd been still just at home myself.
Yes.
Yes, it was amazing, and so many of us are so grateful that we did it.
When I went back to England, they asked me, did I want to stay? I said, I want to stay in the RAF, make it my career. So I signed up for 3 years and started training with Bill Haylock. But Bill Haylock being an H, he was on there before I was on, I was a W. And it was nearly a year. What I did do is after about 13 months, a friend of mine who went up to London, he got a private flying license, so he could fly any type of aircraft, other than for not any private aircraft. Now that was actually based on our training in America. I didn't get my wings until the end of 1946. And when I got my wings, the RAF used to give 2 commissions for each flight of 30 people. Well, I worked hard, but halfway through, we were joined by a son of a brigadier and the son of an air commodore. Well, and they needn't actually, those people got the commissions. The brigadier's son, well, I think he justified, but the air commodore's son was dreadful. You know, he was 6 foot 7 1/4. You could hardly get in the air. I almost leave him in. Anyway, I got my wings. I was for about a year. All I did was training aircraft, and I got so fed up, I decided to leave. I came back, and in a series of events, I qualified as a solicitor, which is a different story.
Really?
I'm just going to concentrate interrupting these gentlemen, because I know this is what we just really all want to hear. We have got a couple of other things just to squeeze in, and then we've got lunch. What I'm going to suggest is perhaps that we shorten our lunch hour a little bit and come back a bit earlier for our session with the pilots, just so we can have some more time talking to them. So I'm going to let you guys have a bit of a break now. So, and then we'll have lunch is going to be at 12:30.